I stood in the stifling silence of the Granton County courtroom, watching my sister, Vanessa, wipe away a practiced tear. She had sued me for every single possession I had acquired since our father died. Painting me as a thief to the entire town, I thought I was about to lose everything. Until the bailiff cleared his throat to read the official inventory list. He did not read out my assets. He read out the proof of her lies. The humidity in Granton Ridge always arrived before the heat did. It was a thick, invisible blanket that settled over the North Carolina foothills by 8 in the morning, sticking your shirt to your back and turning the air into something you had to push through rather than breathe. I did not mind it. After 3 years of chaos, I had learned to appreciate things that were predictable. The humidity was predictable. The morning traffic on the interstate was predictable. My job as the operations manager for Piedmont Logistics was predictable. I was 32 years old, and I had finally bought myself a slice of quiet. My office at the logistics center was a glass-walled box overlooking the warehouse floor. I liked the hum of the conveyor belts and the rhythmic beeping of the forklifts. It was a symphony of order. Things came in, things were scanned, and things went out. There was a paper trail for everything. If a package went missing, we traced the tracking number, found the error, and fixed it. Life, I had discovered during my divorce 2 years ago, was rarely that tidy, but I had scrubbed the mess away. I had a small rental cottage on the edge of town with a porch that looked out over the tree line. I had a savings account that was slowly creeping back up to a respectable number. I had peace. Then the certified letter arrived. It came on a Tuesday, the day I usually audited the driver logs. I had left work early to meet a contractor about a leak in my bathroom, so I was home when the mail carrier, a man named Lyle who had known my father, walked up the driveway. He did not wave like he usually did. He held the thick, rigid envelope with both hands, looking at the ground as I opened the screen door. "You have to sign for this one." "Lucy," Lyle said. His voice was low, apologetic. I signed the digital pad, the stylus slipping in my sweaty grip. I saw the return address on the envelope. It was a law office in Charlotte I did not recognize, but above the firm's name was the reference line, typed in bold, black letters, Re, Walker Vi, Walker. My stomach turned over, a cold stone dropping into a deep well. There was only one other Walker left. I went into my kitchen and sat at the small round table I had bought at a garage sale. I used a paring knife to slice open the envelope. The paper inside was heavy, high-quality bond, the kind that whispered money when you turned the page. Civil summons, complaint for conversion, unjust enrichment, and recovery of family property. I read the words, but they did not make sense. It was like reading a language I had studied in high school but had forgotten. The plaintiff was Vanessa Walker, my sister. The defendant was me. I forced myself to read the first paragraph. Plaintiff alleges that the defendant, Lucy Walker, has wrongfully taken, concealed, and converted to her own use distinct items of personal property, heirlooms, and financial assets belonging to the estate of Robert Walker, thereby depriving the plaintiff of her rightful inheritance. I put the paper down. My hands were shaking so badly the coffee in my mug rippled. Vanessa. I had not seen my sister in nearly 18 months. The last time was a brief, tense lunch where she had asked to borrow $2,000 for a dedicated business venture that she refused to explain. I had said no. I had said no because I was still paying off the funeral costs for our father. I had said no because I was paying for my own divorce lawyer. Vanessa had called me selfish, stood up, and walked out, leaving me with the check. Now she was suing me. I stood up and paced the length of my small kitchen. This had to be a mistake. It had to be a joke. Unjust enrichment? I drove a 6-year-old sedan. I clipped coupons for laundry detergent. I was the one who had stayed in Granton Ridge when Dad got sick. I was the one who moved into the guest room to manage his hospice care so he would not have to go to a facility. Vanessa had been in Atlanta then, or maybe Charleston, chasing a career in event planning that never seemed to launch. She would call once a month, her voice bright and breathless, telling me how busy she was, how she wished she could be there. She came to the funeral wearing oversized sunglasses and left before the reception started. She took nothing but a few photos from the mantelpiece. I picked up the lawsuit again. The language was aggressive. It demanded a court order requiring me to surrender all possessions acquired through family benefit. It was not asking for a specific item. It was asking for an audit of my entire life. I needed a lawyer. The next morning, I sat in the office of Mara Eddings. Mara was a practical woman in her 50s with short, steel gray hair and a desk that was cluttered with files but somehow felt organized. She was not the most expensive lawyer in the county, but she was known for being a bulldog in civil disputes. She read the complaint in silence. The only sound in the room was the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner and the scratching of her pen as she made notes in the margins. "This is broad," Mara said finally, looking up at me over her reading glasses. "Extremely broad." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means she is casting a wide net," Mara said. "Usually, in a case like this, the plaintiff lists specific items: the antique clock, the diamond ring, the grandmother's silver. Your sister has listed some categories, but she is mostly claiming that you used your position as the executor and the caregiver to siphon off assets before the estate was settled. She is claiming you built your current life on stolen money." I felt the blood drain from my face. That is a lie. There was no money. Dad had a pension and Social Security. The house was mortgaged to the hilt to pay for his medical bills. When we sold it, there was barely enough left to cover the closing costs. Mara nodded. "I believe you, Lucy." But civil court is not always about truth. It is about what can be proven and what can be inferred. And right now, she is inferring that you are a thief. Can she win? I asked. Can she actually take my things? Mara leaned back in her chair. Winning might not be her primary goal. Look at this language. She is asking for a full accounting of your assets, bank statements, credit card bills, receipts for furniture. If we fight this, she gets discovery rights. She can subpoena your employment records. She can depose your friends. She can make your private life very public. Why would she do that? I asked, my voice rising. She knows I do not have anything. Mara took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Grief does strange things to people. Lucy, so does jealousy. And sometimes, people just want to hurt someone because they are hurting. But I have to warn you, in a town like Granton Ridge, the lawsuit itself is the punishment. People talk. I left Mara's office with a retainer agreement and a headache that throbbed behind my eyes. I walked to my car, shielding my eyes against the midday sun. I thought about calling Vanessa. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to ask her why she was doing this. But Mara had been clear. Do not contact the plaintiff. Do not text her. Do not email her. Everything goes through me. I went back to work, trying to bury myself in the logistics of shipping routes and fuel surcharges. But the feeling of safety I had cultivated was gone. I felt exposed. 2 days later, the whispers started. Granton Ridge was a town of 15,000 people, but it functioned like a village of 500. There was the church crowd, the high school football crowd, and the business association crowd, and they all overlapped at the grocery store. I was in the break room at work, stirring creamer into my coffee. 2 of the dispatchers, Sarah and Mike, were sitting at the round table near the window. They were laughing about something on a phone screen. When I turned around, the laughter cut off abruptly. "Hey, Lucy," Mike said. His voice was too loud, too cheerful. "Hey, guys," I said. "What is funny?" "Nothing," Sarah said quickly. She put her phone face down on the table. "Just a meme." I nodded and walked out, but the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Back at my desk, I opened my browser. I hesitated, then typed in the URL for the Granton Ridge Community Forum. It was a message board where locals complained about potholes, lost dogs, and the school board. I found the thread immediately. It was titled, "Protect Our Elderly, Keep Family Heirlooms Safe." The post was anonymous, signed only by concerned sister. It is heartbreaking when you trust a sibling to care for a dying parent, only to find out they cleared out the house before the body was cold. My father worked 40 years for his legacy. Now I have to fight in court just to get a memento of him, while my sister buys new furniture and cars with money she claimed did not exist. Shame on you. There were no names mentioned, but the details were specific enough. 40 years of work, the dying parent, the sister. The comments below the post were vicious. That is disgusting. One user wrote, "I hope you take her for everything she has." Some people have no conscience. Another wrote, "I bet I know who this is." I closed the laptop, my heart hammering against my ribs. Vanessa was not just suing me. She was destroying me. She knew that in this town, reputation was currency. If people thought I was a thief who stole from a dying man, I would be a pariah. I spent the weekend inside my house with the curtains drawn. I felt like a criminal in my own living room. I looked at the sofa I had bought from a discount outlet 3 months ago. Was this what she meant by new furniture? I looked at my television. A basic model I had picked up on Black Friday. Was this the unjust enrichment? On Monday, a courier delivered a heavy box to Mara's office. It was Vanessa's initial evidence packet. Mara called me in to review it. We sat at her conference table, the box open between us. "This is what she claims is missing," Mara said. She laid out a series of photographs. I looked at the first one. It was a grainy photo of a pearl brooch. It was shaped like a teardrop, surrounded by tiny diamonds. I recognized it immediately. It had belonged to our grandmother. I have not seen this in 10 years. I said, "Mom wore it to my high school graduation. That was the last time." Mara made a note. "Okay, what about this?" She slid a photo of a vintage men's watch across the table. It was a gold Omega. That was Dad's. I said, "He sold that. He sold it 5 years ago to pay for the new roof." I remember driving him to the jeweler in the mall. "Do you have the receipt?" Mara asked. I shook my head. "No, that was years ago. Why would I keep a receipt for a roof repair on a house we sold?" Mara sighed. "Okay, and this?" She placed a third photo in front of me. It was a thick, leather-bound notebook with a cracked spine. My breath hitched. That was Mom's recipe book. It was not just a book of recipes. It was a diary of our childhood. Mom had written notes in the margins. Vanessa loved the cinnamon on this. Lucy helped stir the batter. It was the one thing I had actually wanted when Dad died. I had searched the entire house for it. I had assumed it was lost in the chaos of the hospice equipment coming in and out. "She says you have it," Mara said. "She says you took it the day Dad died and refused to share it." I did not take it. I whispered. I looked for it. I cried because I could not find it. Mara watched me carefully. "Lucy, I need you to listen to me. This list includes jewelry, cash withdrawals she claims you made, and household items, but she has photos of them, recent photos. Look at the background of the brooch picture." I leaned in. The brooch was sitting on a piece of dark velvet, in the corner of the frame. There was a sliver of a date stamp. It was from 6 months ago. I felt a chill run down my spine. That date. That is from this year. "Exactly," Mara said. "If this photo was taken 6 months ago, and you say you have not seen the brooch in 10 years, then where is the brooch?" "I do not know." I said, "And look at the recipe book," Mara said. The photo showed the book lying open on a wooden table. There was a coffee stain on the page that I did not remember. "Someone has these things," Mara said. "Vanessa is claiming it is you. But if it is not you, then either she has them and is lying, or someone else has them. Why would she sue me for things she already has?" I asked. "To punish you," Mara said, "or to create a narrative. If she can convince the court you are hiding these sentimental items, the judge will stop trusting you. Then, when she demands money for the missing assets, the judge will be more likely to grant it." I left Mara's office with a task list. I had to inventory every single item in my home. I had to find receipts for everything I owned. I had to prove that my life was mine. I spent the next 3 nights tearing my house apart. I emptied drawers. I dug through boxes of old tax returns. I found the receipt for my sofa. I found the invoice for my car repairs. I created a spreadsheet, listing every possession I had, down to my winter coat and my toaster. As I worked, a cold clarity began to settle over me. Vanessa was not just mistaken. She was fabricating a reality. She had photos of items I had not seen in years. That meant she had access to them. I found an old email from Dad, sent a month before he died. It was short, typed with his shaky hands. "Lucy, make sure you check the safety deposit box at the bank. I think the key is in the desk." I remembered checking the box. It had been empty. I had assumed Dad had emptied it years ago. But what if he hadn't? What if Vanessa had gotten there first? But Vanessa hadn't been in town. I was sure of it. I was sitting on my living room floor, surrounded by piles of paper, when the realization hit me. The items in the lawsuit, the brooch, the watch, the recipe book, they were never in my possession. Not for a single day. Vanessa knew that. She knew I was the responsible one. She knew I would turn the house upside down looking for them. She was counting on me not being able to prove a negative. How do you prove you don't have a hidden box of gold? On Friday afternoon, just as I was finishing my inventory spreadsheet, the second blow landed. Mara called me. Her voice was tight. "We just received a notice of deposition," she said. "They want to depose you in 2 weeks." "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We expected that. There is something else." "Lucy." Mara paused. "Vanessa has changed counsel. She is no longer using the small firm in Charlotte." "Who is she using?" "Calder and Brine," Mara said. I frowned. I did not know the name. "Is that bad?" "Calder and Brine is a corporate litigation firm based in Raleigh," Mara said. "They handle high-stakes divorces for athletes and corporate liability defense. Their junior associates bill at $600 an hour." I gripped the phone. Vanessa does not have that kind of money. She borrows money for rent. She took a bus to the funeral because her car was repossessed. "Well," Mara said grimly, "she has the money now, or someone is paying it for her. You do not hire Calder and Brine on a contingency fee for a family dispute over a recipe book. This just stopped being a nuisance suit. Lucy, someone is investing a lot of capital to destroy you." I hung up the phone and looked out the window at the quiet street. The humidity was breaking, giving way to a thunderstorm. The sky was turning a bruised purple. I had thought this was about jealousy. I had thought it was about my sister being petty and cruel. But you do not hire a Shark Tank law firm to be petty. You hire them to kill. Who was backing her? And why? I looked at the stack of receipts on my floor. My pathetic little defense against a machine I did not understand. I was practical. I was resilient. But as the first crack of thunder shook the house, I realized that being innocent might not be enough. I was in a war, and I had just brought a pocket knife to a gunfight. I picked up the photo of the recipe book again. I studied the coffee stain on the page. It looked fresh. "I am coming for you, Vanessa," I whispered to the empty room, "and I am going to find out who is holding the camera." The rain began to fall, heavy and relentless, washing down the dust of Granton Ridge. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark, listening to the storm, waiting for the flash of lightning that would show me where to step next. The deposition was in 14 days. I had 2 weeks to find the truth, or I was going to lose everything I had built. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I made a pot of coffee, strong and black. I was not going to sleep tonight. I pulled my laptop toward me and opened a new search tab. Calder and Brine, LLP. If they were the weapon, I needed to know how they worked, and then I would find out who pulled the trigger. The week before the deposition, my life began to dissolve. It did not happen all at once with a loud explosion, but rather like a sweater caught on a nail, unraveling thread by thread until the shape of who I was became unrecognizable. It started with the bank. I was sitting at my desk at Piedmont Logistics, reviewing the quarterly fuel manifests, when my cell phone buzzed. It was a fraud prevention specialist from Granton Community Bank. Her name was Linda, and I knew her from the Tuesday morning teller line. "Lucy," Linda said. Her voice was professional but strained. "I am calling because we have had 3 separate inquiries into your checking and savings accounts in the last 48 hours. They were flagged as high risk because they originated from a third-party credit investigation agency. Did you authorize a background check?" I stopped typing. "No," I said. "I am not applying for any loans. I am not looking for a new apartment. Who is requesting the information? It is listed as an administrative inquiry related to pending litigation, Linda said. But usually, they need a signed release form from you. The request included a digital signature. I felt the blood drain from my face. I did not sign anything. I will flag it as disputed, Linda said. But Lucy, they have your social security number. They have your previous addresses going back 10 years. Whoever is doing this is thorough. I hung up, my hands trembling. It was Vanessa. It had to be. But Vanessa could barely balance a checkbook. She did not know how to run third-party credit sweeps. This was the work of Calder and Brine. They were digging for hidden assets, convinced that I had buried a fortune somewhere in my modest life. 2 hours later, the second thread pulled loose. I received a voicemail from a local moving company. Heavy Lift Movers. Hi, this is a message for Ms. Walker, the voice said. We are calling to confirm the pickup for Unit 404 at Hawthorne Lock and Store for tomorrow morning at 8. Please call us back to confirm access codes. I stared at the phone. I did not have a storage unit. I had never rented a storage unit in my life. My house had an attic and a shed. I had no need to pay $100 a month to store junk I did not use. I called the number back immediately. This is Lucy Walker, I said. You left a message about a pickup. There must be a mistake. I did not hire you. The dispatcher sounded bored. I have a work order here for Lucy Walker. Pick up at Hawthorne Lock and Store. Unit 404. Destination is a residential address in Charlotte. We have a credit card on file for the deposit. What are the last 4 digits of the card? I asked. I cannot give out full financial info, but it ends in 5512. That is not my card, I said. Cancel the pickup. Do not move anything. If you move anything, I will report it as theft. I hung up and grabbed my purse. Hawthorne Lock and Store was on the other side of town, tucked behind a row of auto body shops. I told my boss I had a family emergency, a lie that was becoming painfully true, and drove straight there. The facility was a sprawling grid of orange metal doors surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. The office smelled of floor wax and stale popcorn. A young man with acne and a name tag that read, Jared, was behind the counter, watching a video on his phone. Can I help you? Jared asked, not looking up. I need information on Unit 404. I said, my name is Lucy Walker. I was told this unit is rented in my name. Jared tapped on his keyboard. Let me check. He frowned at the screen. Okay. Unit 404. It is paid up through the end of the year. Who rented it? I asked. The system lists the primary contact as... He squinted. It says Walker. Lucy. But the billing address is a P.O. box in Raleigh. That is not my address. I said, I want to see the rental agreement. I want to see the ID that was used to open this unit. I cannot show you that. Jared said, privacy policy. Unless you have a warrant, or you are the person on the contract with the matching key code, I cannot give you the file. I am the person on the contract, I shouted. I slammed my driver's license onto the counter. Look, Lucy Walker. Jared looked at the license, then back at the screen. He looked uncomfortable. Look, lady, the name matches, but the account is set up under a corporate billing profile. It is not a personal rental. It is listed under a business entity. What business entity? I demanded. He hesitated. I really should not be telling you this. Jared, I said, leaning in, someone is using my name to move property I do not know about. If you do not tell me, I'm coming back with the police. He sighed and turned the monitor slightly. It was just a glance, but I saw the account name at the top of the ledger, Piedmont Asset Recovery. I froze. My employer was Piedmont Logistics. This name was terrifyingly similar, close enough that a vendor or a bank might confuse the two, yet different enough to be a completely separate legal entity. Is that associated with Piedmont Logistics? I asked. No idea, Jared said, pulling the screen back. It just says Piedmont Asset Recovery. Look, if you want to get into that unit, you need to bring a bolt cutter and proof of ownership, or you need a court order. I cannot help you. I walked back to my car, my legs feeling like lead. Piedmont Asset Recovery. It sounded official. It sounded like something I would set up if I were trying to hide money. If Vanessa's lawyers found this unit, and it was full of valuables, and it was rented in my name with a company that sounded like my employer, it would look like I was running a massive embezzlement scheme. I called Mara immediately. We need to subpoena Hawthorne Lock and Store. I said, someone is framing me. The deposition took place 3 days later in the conference room of a neutral court reporting agency. The room was freezing. The air conditioning hummed aggressively, battling the North Carolina heat outside. But inside it felt like a morgue. Vanessa sat across the long mahogany table. She looked impeccable. She was wearing a black dress that was modest but clearly expensive, and her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She looked like the grieving daughter. She looked like the victim. Next to her was her attorney from Calder and Brine. He was a man named Richard Sterling, a silver-haired litigator with a reputation for destroying witnesses. He did not look at me. He arranged his papers with surgical precision. Mara sat beside me. Just answer the question asked. She had whispered to me before we walked in. Do not volunteer information. Do not get angry. The videographer turned on the camera. The red light blinked. Mr. Sterling began. He did not start with the heirlooms. He started with my character. Ms. Walker, he said, his voice smooth and deep. You were the primary caregiver for your father in the final 6 months of his life, correct? Yes, I said. And during that time, your sister, Vanessa, was living in Atlanta? Yes. Did you encourage her to visit? I asked her to visit many times. I said, Mr. Sterling smiled thinly. Or did you tell her that your father was too tired for visitors? Did you tell her that her presence would upset him? I never said that. I said, we have text messages. Ms. Walker, where you told Vanessa, he is having a bad day. Maybe come next weekend. Do you recall that? He was in pain. I said, he was on morphine. I was trying to protect his dignity, not keep her away, so you made the decision to isolate him. Sterling said, you became the gatekeeper. You controlled who he saw and who he spoke to, and in that isolation, you controlled his financial decisions. Did you not? No, I said. Dad made his own decisions until the very end. Vanessa let out a small, choked sob. I looked at her. She had a tissue pressed to her nose. Her shoulders were shaking. I just wanted to say goodbye, Vanessa whispered, her voice trembling perfectly for the camera. I just wanted to see him. But every time I called, Lucy said he was sleeping. She erased me. She spent 6 months erasing me from his life so she could rewrite the will. Vanessa, please, Sterling said gently, let me handle this. I felt a surge of nausea. It was a performance. It had to be. But looking at her, seeing the wetness in her eyes, I felt a flicker of doubt. Had I been too protective? Had I made it hard for her? No. I remembered the nights I spent sleeping in a chair next to his bed while she was posting photos of brunch on social media. I remembered the way she sighed when I told her the hospice nurse needed to be paid. Sterling turned back to me. Ms. Walker, we are seeking compensation for emotional and financial damages. My client has suffered years of distress because you coerced your father into changing the beneficiary designations on his life insurance policy. He did not change them. I said, the policy lapsed. He stopped paying the premiums 3 years before he died because he could not afford them. Sterling slid a piece of paper across the table. This is a reinstatement form, dated 2 months before his death. It lists you as the sole beneficiary. I looked at the document. It was a photocopy. The signature looked like Dad's, but it was shaky. I never saw this. I said, there was no payout. There was no insurance money. Then where did the money come from? Ms. Walker? Sterling asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. How did you afford a down payment on your home? How did you afford your new car? You are an operations manager. The math does not work unless there was a windfall. I worked overtime, I said, my voice rising. I saved. I lived on rice and beans. Vanessa looked up, her eyes red. You stole our family. Lucy, you stole our history, and now you are lying about it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table. But I saw Mara's hand rest gently on my arm, a silent command to breathe. I sat back. I did not steal anything. I said quietly, "The deposition lasted 6 hours. By the end, I felt hollowed out. I felt like a villain. Sterling had twisted every act of kindness I had performed into an act of manipulation. Buying Dad groceries became taking control of his diet. Paying his electric bill became monitoring his accounts. When we finally left the building, the sun was setting. I leaned against the brick wall of the parking garage, shaking. "They are telling a story," Mara said, lighting a cigarette. She rarely smoked, only when things were bad, and it is a good story. The jury will like it. "What do we do?" I asked. "We stop playing defense," Mara said. "I am filing a motion for specificity tomorrow. No more vague accusations. If they claim you have a reinstatement form, I want the original. If they claim you have jewelry, I want a manifest. The judge is going to make them show their cards." The following week, the judge granted Mara's motion. He ordered both parties to submit a sworn, itemized list of every contested asset, along with proof of ownership, within 10 days. This was my chance. I needed to prove that the items Vanessa claimed I had were never in my possession. I decided to visit Aunt Diane. Diane Mercer was not technically our aunt. She was our mother's cousin, but she had been a fixture in our childhood. She lived in a small, clutter-filled bungalow on the north side of town. She was a kind woman, soft and anxious, the kind of person who apologized when you bumped into her. I sat in her living room, drinking tea from a chipped mug. The house smelled of lavender and cat litter. "Aunt Diane," I said, "I need to ask you about Mom's things. The recipe book, the pearl brooch. Do you remember what happened to them after the funeral?" Diane looked down at her hands. She was twisting a ring on her finger. "Oh, Lucy, I hate all of this fighting." "Your mother would be so upset." "I know," I said, "but Vanessa is suing me. She says I stole them." Diane bit her lip. She looked at the mantelpiece, where a photo of my mother sat in a silver frame. Vanessa came by. Diane said softly, "About a year ago, she was very upset. She said she needed to secure some things. She said you were going through a hard time with the divorce and she wanted to keep the family treasures safe." My heart stopped. "She took them?" Diane hesitated. "She asked me to hold on to a few things. She brought a box over. She said she did not have a safe place for it because she was moving apartments." "What was in the box?" I asked. "I do not know," Diane said. "It was taped shut. She left it here for a few months. Then she came and got it." "When?" I asked. "When did she get it?" Diane thought for a moment. "Maybe 6 months ago, right before she started talking about the lawsuit." I closed my eyes. Vanessa had the items. She had staged them with Aunt Diane to keep them out of her own apartment, then retrieved them to take the photos for the evidence packet. She had created a gap in the timeline so she could claim they were missing. "Diane," I said, "would you be willing to testify to that?" Diane's eyes widened. "Oh, Lucy, I cannot go to court. I cannot get in the middle. Vanessa, she can be so mean when she is angry, and Mark says I should stay out of it." "Mark?" I asked. "Mark Pell," Diane said, a slight blush rising on her cheeks. "He is, well, we have been seeing each other. He helps me around the house. He says family business should stay in the family." I had never heard of Mark Pell, but something about the way Diane said his name made me uneasy. "Please, Aunt Diane," I said, "just think about it. I left her house with a new piece of the puzzle, but no proof. Diane's word against Vanessa's would not hold up without evidence." I went home and opened my laptop. I needed a paper trail. If Vanessa had moved things, she would have needed help. She did not own a car. I spent hours scrolling through old emails, searching for keywords: box, move, storage. Finally, at 2 a.m, I found it. It was an email from 3 years ago, right after I had moved Dad into hospice care. From Vanessa Walker to Lucy Walker. Subject: Urgent, box Luke. "I am in a jam with my landlord. I have a box of Mom's stuff I grabbed last time I was in town. I cannot keep it here. Can I send it to you to store in the attic until I get settled? I had replied, Sure, send it over. But then, a follow-up email from Vanessa. 2 days later. Never mind. My friend is driving through Granton. I will have him drop it off at Aunt Diane's instead. Easier. I stared at the screen. She had admitted in writing that she had the box. She had admitted she was sending it to Diane's. But I needed more. I needed to prove she retrieved it. I remembered something Diane had said. Mark says I should stay out of it. Who was Mark Pell? On Wednesday, the fallout at work began. My boss, a stern man named Mr. Henderson, called me into his office. He did not ask me to sit down. He turned his monitor around so I could see it. It was an email. The sender was anonymous. A string of random numbers and letters from a secure server. Attached to the email were screenshots of the lawsuit, the complaint for conversion, the allegations of theft, and a line of text in the body of the email. Is it company policy to employ operations managers who are currently under investigation for financial fraud and elder abuse? I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Mr. Henderson, this is a personal civil dispute. It is not a criminal investigation. My sister is suing me because she is angry about the inheritance. Mr. Henderson looked at me over his glasses. Lucy, you handle sensitive inventory. You have access to the logistics database. We have clients who trust us with millions of dollars in goods. I have never touched a thing that did not belong to me. I said, You know my record. I do. He said, and that is why I am not firing you. Yet, but I cannot have you on the Miller account while this is hanging over your head. The optics are too risky. The Miller account was the biggest project of the year. It came with a performance bonus that I was counting on to pay my legal fees. I am moving you to the archive team, he said, until this is resolved. I walked back to my desk, my face burning. I could feel the eyes of my coworkers on me. The silence in the room was heavy. They had seen me get called in. They knew something was wrong. I packed my bag and left early. I could not sit there and pretend to work. Vanessa was not just trying to win a lawsuit. She was trying to starve me out. She was attacking my income so I could not afford to fight her. 2 days before the deadline for the itemized list, a courier from Mara's office dropped off a thick envelope at my house. Discovery Production, Batch 2. I sat on my living room floor and opened it. It was more of the same. Bank statements from Dad's account that showed nothing unusual. Medical bills. But at the bottom of the stack, there was a single sheet of paper that made my breath catch in my throat. It was a receipt. Received from Vanessa Walker. 1 box containing miscellaneous family heirlooms, to be held for safekeeping. The date on the receipt was from 4 years ago, and at the bottom, there was a signature. Lucy Walker. I stared at the signature. It was written in blue ink. The loop of the L was sweeping. The Y trailed off with a sharp upward flick. It looked exactly like my signature. I held the paper up to the light. My hand was shaking. If I didn't know better, I would have sworn I signed it. It had the same pressure points, the same slant. But I knew I hadn't. I had never signed a receipt for Vanessa in my life. We were sisters, not business partners. We didn't exchange receipts for boxes. I looked closer. The dot over the I in the typed date was slightly pixelated, but the signature was crisp. It was a tracing, or a practice run. It was too perfect. It lacked the tiny, unconscious variations of a spontaneous signature. It was a drawing of my name. I lowered the paper. This was the smoking gun they were going to use. They were going to present this to the judge and say, Look, she signed for the heirlooms. She accepted custody. Now they are gone. It was a forgery, and it was a good one. I realized then that I was not dealing with a chaotic, jealous sister. I was dealing with a criminal operation. Someone had studied my handwriting. Someone had created a fake storage unit. Someone was systematically planting evidence to frame me for a crime that hadn't happened. I thought about the storage unit at Hawthorne Lock and Store. Piedmont Asset Recovery. I thought about Aunt Diane's boyfriend, Mark, who handled errands and told her to stay quiet. I thought about the anonymous email sent to my boss. This was a coordinated attack, and I was the target. I picked up my phone and called Mara. Mara, I said, I am looking at the receipt. It is damning. Lucy, Mara said, if the judge believes that signature is yours, we lose. It is not mine. I said, it is a forgery, and I think I know how to prove it. How? Mara asked. Because, I said, looking at the date on the receipt, on the day this was supposedly signed, I wasn't even in the state. I was at a logistics conference in Atlanta, and I have the flight records to prove it. I hung up the phone. The fear was still there, heavy and cold in my stomach, but something else was rising up to meet it. Anger. Vanessa wanted a fight? She wanted to drag me through the mud? Fine. I looked at the forged signature one last time. I was done playing the victim. It was time to find out who was holding the pen. The office of Dr. Neil Caro smelled of ammonia and ozone. It was a stark, clinical space tucked into the back of a generic business park in Raleigh, far removed from the mahogany and leather of Mara's law office. Dr. Caro was a forensic document examiner, a man who looked at paper the way a surgeon looked at a patient, with detachment and a terrifying attention to detail. I sat on a metal stool, my hands clamped between my knees, watching him work. He had the receipt, the damning piece of paper that claimed I had accepted a box of heirlooms from Vanessa 4 years ago, under a microscope. The image was projected onto a large monitor on the wall. He had been silent for 20 minutes. Mara stood by the door, her arms crossed, watching the screen. She had told me that Caro was the best in the state, that he had testified in federal fraud cases, but right now, all I felt was a sick dread. If he said the signature was genuine, my defense would collapse. I would look like a liar who had conveniently forgotten signing for the very items I was accused of stealing. Finally, Caro spun his chair around. He was a small man with wire-rimmed glasses and nimble fingers that seemed to dance when he spoke. "It is a simulation," he said. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "What does that mean?" "It means it is a drawing, not a signature," Caro said. He picked up a laser pointer and aimed it at the screen. "Look here, at the top of the loop on the capital L. Do you see that heavy concentration of ink? That is a hesitation mark. A natural writer moves fluidly. They do not stop to think about the shape of the letter. This person stopped. They paused to check their work against a model." He moved the laser to the tail of the signature. "And here," he continued, "the pressure is uniform throughout the entire signature. That is highly unusual. When people sign their names, they vary pressure, heavy on the downstroke, light on the upstroke. This was done with a slow, constant pressure. It suggests the hand was moving cautiously, likely tracing over a light source or a projection. So it is a forgery," Mara said, her voice flat and hard. "It is a non-genuine signature produced by simulation," Caro corrected. "Precise to a fault. And it is a good one. Whoever did this had a sample of your genuine signature and spent time practicing. But they made a mistake." "What mistake?" I asked. Caro clicked a button, and the screen changed. It showed a high-contrast close-up of the paper fibers. They used a gel pen. Caro said, "Gel ink sits on top of the paper fibers rather than soaking in immediately like a ballpoint. Because they were moving slowly to trace the lines. The ink pooled in the turns. You can see the microscopic blobbing here, and here. If you had signed this rapidly, as one does in a normal transaction, these pools would not exist." I stared at the screen. The evidence was irrefutable, scientifically sound, and completely terrifying. This wasn't Vanessa having a bad day. This wasn't a sister lashing out in grief. This was a crime. Someone had sat at a desk, likely with a light box or a window, and carefully, methodically forged my name to frame me for theft. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. I stood up, needing air. "Thank you. Dr. Caro," Mara said, "we will need a formal affidavit by Friday." I walked out into the parking lot, the sunlight blinding after the dim lab. I leaned against my car, taking deep gulps of the humid air. I had spent my whole life thinking of Vanessa as chaotic, a hurricane that blew through, made a mess, and left. But hurricanes were forces of nature. They didn't plan. They didn't trace signatures. This was cold. This was calculated. Mara came out a moment later. She put a hand on my shoulder. "We have them on the forgery," she said. "That invalidates the receipt. It attacks her credibility. It proves she hates me." I whispered. "It proves she wants to destroy me. It proves she is desperate." Mara said, "People do not commit felonies unless they are cornered. We need to find out what she is afraid of." That evening, I sat on my back porch with Tessa Harlan. Tessa had been my best friend since the 7th grade. She was an ER nurse, the kind of person who could hold a bleeding artery closed with one hand and eat a sandwich with the other. Nothing rattled her. I had poured us both glasses of cheap white wine, but neither of us was drinking. I was staring at the tree line, watching the fireflies blink in the gathering dark. "I feel like I provoked this," I said quietly. Tessa turned to me, her eyebrows pulling together. "Lucy, stop. You did not provoke a forgery. You did not provoke a lawsuit. I mean, I was always the one who fixed things." I said, "When Dad got sick, I took over. When Mom died, I handled the arrangements. When Vanessa got evicted the first time, I sent her money. I took up so much space being the responsible one that maybe I made her feel small. Maybe she felt like she had to tear me down just to be seen." Tessa set her glass down on the railing with a sharp clink. "That is the most twisted logic I have ever heard," she said, "and I work in a hospital where meth addicts blame the nurses for their itching." She shifted in her chair to face me. "Lucy, you are doing it again. You are trying to find a way to take the blame because that is what you do. You think if you are responsible for the problem, you can be responsible for the solution, but you cannot fix this. You cannot love your sister into being a good person." "But she is my sister," I said, my voice cracking. "We shared a bedroom. We have the same nose. How can she hate me this much?" "She does not hate you," Tessa said. "She is using you. There is a difference. Hate is passionate. This feels like a transaction. You are an asset she is trying to liquidate." I shivered. Despite the heat, the word liquidate hung in the air. "Responsibility made you a target," Tessa continued, her voice softer now. "Because you are predictable. She knows you will follow the rules. She knows you will show up to court. She knows you will worry about doing the right thing. She is banking on you being a good person so she can be a bad one." I looked at Tessa. She was right. I had been playing by the rules of a family that no longer existed. Vanessa was playing a different game entirely. "I need to stop being predictable," I said. Tessa smiled. A grim, tight expression. "Now you are talking." Later that night, unable to sleep, I pulled out the evidence packet again. I spread the photographs on my dining room table. The pearl brooch, the gold watch, the recipe book. Mara had told me to look for details, for inconsistencies. I had stared at these photos 100 times, but this time, I tried to look past the objects. I tried to look at the world they were sitting in. I picked up the photo of the brass floor lamp. Vanessa claimed this lamp had been in our father's study. I knew for a fact Dad had never owned a brass lamp. His study was lit by ugly fluorescent tubes he refused to replace. In the photo, the lamp was standing on a rug. It was a distinctive rug, a fake Persian runner with a deep red border and a pattern of blue geometric flowers. The fringe on the left side was slightly unraveled. I frowned. I had seen that rug before. I picked up the photo of the brooch. It was resting on a dark velvet pad, but in the blurred background, I could see the edge of a wooden shelf. On the shelf, there was a small price tag sticker, yellow with a red border. I closed my eyes, trying to visualize the shops in Granton Ridge. The antique store on Main Street used white tags. The pawn shop used digital barcodes. Then it hit me. The smell of lemon polish and old dust. The sound of a bell jingling when you open the door. Juniper House Consignment. It was a shop on the west side of town, near the highway. I went there occasionally to look for cheap frames. They used yellow tags with red borders, and right inside the entrance, leading down the main aisle, was a long, red, fake Persian runner with a frayed edge. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the Juniper House Facebook page. I scrolled through their photos from the last few months. There it was, posted in February. New arrivals, elegant brass floor lamp and vintage accessories. The photo showed the exact same lamp, standing on the exact same rug. Vanessa hadn't taken these photos in her apartment. She hadn't taken them at Aunt Diane's. She had taken them inside the consignment shop, which meant she wasn't just hiding the items, she was selling them. The next morning, I called in sick to work. It wasn't entirely a lie. My stomach was in knots. I put on a baseball cap and sunglasses, feeling ridiculous, like a spy in a bad movie. I drove to Juniper House Consignment. The shop was quiet. It was a Wednesday morning, and the only other customer was an elderly woman looking at ceramic cats. The owner, a woman named Beverly with bright orange lipstick and glasses on a chain, was behind the counter reading a magazine. I walked the aisles, my heart pounding. I found the lamp. It was tucked in a corner near a stack of old encyclopedias. The price tag said $80. I picked up the tag. On the back, in small code, it said, Consignor 402. I walked up to the counter, carrying a random porcelain bowl I had grabbed from a shelf. "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. I was looking at that brass lamp in the back. "It is beautiful. Do you know the history of it?" Beverly looked up. "Oh, that one. Yes, lovely piece. It came in with a large estate lot a few months ago." "Estate lot?" I asked. "Yes. A lady brought in quite a few things," Beverly said. "Very high quality. Vintage jewelry, some silver. She said she was clearing out her late father's house." My hands tightened on the porcelain bowl. "What did she look like?" Beverly pursed her lips. "Tall, very striking. Always wore too much perfume. Something floral. Gardenia, maybe?" Vanessa wore gardenia perfume. She had worn it since high school. "She comes in every few weeks to collect her check," Beverly added. "Though she usually asks for cash. Said she does not trust banks. Does she go by a name?" I asked. Beverly narrowed her eyes. "Why do you ask?" "Honey, I think I might know her." I stammered. "I think she might be my cousin. Is her name Vanessa?" Beverly shook her head. "No, her name is Eliza. Eliza Stone." I froze. Eliza was our mother's middle name. Stone was her maiden name. Vanessa was using our dead mother's name to fence the stolen heirlooms. I bought the bowl to avoid suspicion and walked out of the shop, my legs shaking. I sat in my car and called Mara. "Get the subpoena," I said. "She is selling everything at Juniper House under the name Eliza Stone, and she is taking the payments in cash." 2 days later, Mara had the records. We sat in her office, the spreadsheets from Juniper House spread out on the desk. The owner, Beverly, had been less chatty once the subpoena arrived, but she had complied. "It is a liquidation," Mara said, running her finger down the list. "She has sold the brooch. She sold the watch. She sold the silver tea set. In total, she has cashed out about $4,000 in the last 3 months. $4,000, I said, staring at the numbers. "That is not enough to pay for Calder and Brine." "Exactly," Mara said. I ran a background check on Vanessa's financials in preparation for the settlement conference. "Lucy. She is drowning. She has 3 outstanding judgments for credit card debt in Mecklenburg County. She was evicted from her apartment in Charlotte 4 months ago. She has no declared income. So how is she paying a top-tier law firm?" I asked. "Evan Brine charges $600 an hour. She has racked up $50,000 in legal fees by now. Someone is funding the litigation." Mara said, "Third-party litigation finance is a real thing, but usually, companies only invest if there is a massive payout at the end. Millions of dollars. Your father's estate is not worth that. So it is personal." I said, "It has to be." Mara said, "Someone is paying her legal bills directly. We need to find out who holds the purse strings, because Vanessa is just the face of this operation. She is the puppet." I looked at the list of sold items again. The pearl brooch, sold for $300. The watch, sold for $500. She was selling our memories for pennies, just to keep herself afloat, while someone else paid for the lawyers to destroy me. That Friday, I came home to find a package on my doorstep. It was a padded envelope, heavy and sodden. It had rained earlier in the day, but the porch was covered. The package shouldn't have been wet. I picked it up. It dripped onto my shoes. The label was hand-printed in block letters. "To Lucy Walker. There was no return address. I carried it inside and put it in the kitchen sink. I used scissors to carefully cut the tape. A smell wafted out. Mold, wet paper, and rot. I reached in and pulled out the contents. It was the recipe book, my mother's book, the one Vanessa had sued me for, the one she claimed I had stolen. It was destroyed. The leather cover was bloated and slimy. The pages were fused together into a solid, pulpy brick. Ink bled across the edges in blue and black rivulets. It looked like it had been soaked in a bucket of water for days. I gasped, a sob catching in my throat. I tried to peel open the front cover, but the paper tore. Stuck to the front, protected by a layer of clear packing tape, was a neon yellow sticky note. Return what you stole. I stared at the note. The handwriting was jagged, aggressive. This was madness. She was suing me for the book, claiming it was a priceless heirloom I had hidden away, and now she, or someone working with her, had mailed it to me. Destroyed? With a demand to return it? It was a mind game. It was designed to make me feel unsafe in my own home. It was designed to make me panic. Look, we can touch you. Look, we can destroy what you love. I grabbed my phone and took a picture of the package, the book, and the note. Then I called Mara. Do not touch it anymore, Mara said, her voice sharp. Put it in a plastic bag. We will bring it to court. This proves she had possession of the item she claimed was missing. But why destroy it? I asked, tears streaming down my face. Why ruin Mom's book? Because they do not care about the book. Lucy, Mara said, they care about breaking you. I hung up and looked at the shipping label again. It was a standard ground shipping label printed from a self-service kiosk. The origin zip code was 28711. I typed it into my phone. Ridgeway Junction. It was a small crossroads town about 30 minutes north of Granton Ridge. There wasn't much there. A gas station, a dollar store, and a drugstore. I looked at the tracking number. It showed the package was accepted at 4:15 p.m. yesterday. I called Mara back. The package came from a kiosk in Ridgeway Junction. I said, yesterday at 4:15 p.m. I will send an investigator. Mara said, if it was a kiosk, there are cameras. We will subpoena the footage. The following Monday, the court order arrived. Order for pretrial settlement conference. The judge was forcing us into a room together. It was standard procedure, a last-ditch effort to resolve the case before a full trial. Mara called me to prepare. We are going to offer a settlement. Mara said, we will offer to return any items currently in your possession, which is nothing, and we will agree to a mutual release of claims. We walk away. Each side pays their own legal fees. She won't take it. I said, we have to offer it. Mara said, it shows the judge we are reasonable. The conference was held at the courthouse, in a small, windowless mediation room. A court-appointed mediator sat at the head of the table. Vanessa sat with Richard Sterling. She looked tired. The polished veneer was cracking. Her makeup was a little too heavy, hiding dark circles. She wouldn't look at me. Mara presented our offer. We are willing to drop the counterclaims for defamation if the plaintiff dismisses the suit with prejudice, she said. Sterling didn't even consult Vanessa. He leaned back in his chair and smiled. Absolutely not, he said. We have evidence that the plaintiff has been selling the very items she claims were stolen, Mara said, sliding the Juniper House records across the table. We have evidence of forgery. If we go to trial, Ms. Walker, you are going to face perjury charges. Vanessa flinched. She looked at Sterling, her eyes wide with sudden panic. Sterling placed a hand on her arm, silencing her. We deny those characterizations, Sterling said smoothly, and our demand stands. We require the defendant to surrender all possessions listed in the master inventory, plus punitive damages of $50,000. That is impossible, I said, speaking up for the first time. I do not have $50,000, and I do not have the items. Then we want a court order for the seizure of your current assets. Sterling said, your car, your savings, the contents of your home. This isn't about the heirlooms, is it? I said, looking directly at Vanessa. You sold the heirlooms. You sold Mom's brooch for $300. Vanessa stared at the table, her hands twisting in her lap. We are done here, Sterling said. Standing up, we will see you at the final hearing. As they walked out, I saw Vanessa pause at the door. She looked back at me. For a second, just a second, I saw terror in her eyes. She looked like a trapped animal. Then Sterling put a hand on her back and guided her out. I sat in the empty room with Mara. The silence was heavy. She is not driving this, I said. She is terrified. She is in too deep. Mara said, she cannot stop. If she stops now, she owes Sterling's firm money she doesn't have. She has to win to pay the debt, but she can't win. I said, we have the proof. That is what worries me. Mara said slowly, Sterling is a shark. He knows we have the Juniper House records. He knows about the forgery. He wouldn't push for trial unless he had an ace up his sleeve, or unless the goal isn't to win a judgment. What is the goal? I asked. To bankrupt you before we get to the verdict, Mara said, or to force you to reveal something they think you are hiding. I went home feeling heavy. The fight wasn't over. It was mutating into something darker. I walked into my kitchen and looked at the empty spot on the counter where I used to keep my keys. I felt a draft. I looked at the back door. It was unlocked. I always lock the back door. I froze. I listened to the silence of the house. Had someone been here? I walked slowly through the rooms. Nothing seemed missing. The TV was there. My laptop was there. But in the bedroom, a drawer was slightly open. My bedside drawer. I walked over and looked inside. It was empty, except for a few chapsticks and a book, but something was wrong. I reached in and felt the back of the drawer, a small velvet pouch I kept there, containing nothing but a few spare keys and a broken necklace, was gone, and on the pillow, there was another sticky note. It is not over. I sank onto the bed. They had been in my house, while I was at the settlement conference, while I was sitting across from Vanessa. Someone had been in my house. I thought about the kiosk in Ridgeway Junction. I thought about the forged signature. I thought about the expensive lawyer. Vanessa was the face, but the hands reaching into my life belonged to someone else. I picked up the phone to call Mara again, but stopped. I needed to see the footage from Ridgeway Junction. I needed to see who mailed that package, because whoever mailed the package was the same person who had just walked through my home. I was done waiting for the law to protect me. The law was too slow. I grabbed my keys. I was going to Ridgeway Junction. Survival became a physical sensation. It lived in the tightness of my jaw and the shallow rhythm of my breathing. I stopped sleeping in my bed. Instead, I spent the nights on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the front door with the lights off. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like a footstep. Every car passing on the street sounded like an arrival. I was 32 years old, but in the dark, I felt 7 again. I was back in our childhood living room, watching Vanessa knock a porcelain figurine off the shelf. I remembered the way she had frozen, her eyes wide, calculating the distance between the accident and the consequences. Then she had looked at me. Lucy did it. She had practiced whispering. Lucy was running. By the time our parents walked in, Vanessa was already crying, pointing a trembling finger at me. I had taken the punishment because I was too stunned to speak. The pattern was 30 years old. Vanessa created the chaos, and then she claimed the victimhood. But this time, she wasn't just breaking a figurine. She was breaking my life. The morning after the break-in, I drove to Mara's office. The sun was bright and offensive, shining on a world that was continuing as if nothing had happened. Mara was waiting for me. She looked grim. We got the footage from the shipping kiosk, she said. She turned her monitor toward me. The video was grainy. A time-stamped black and white recording from a security camera mounted in the corner of the drugstore in Ridgeway Junction. I watched a figure walk up to the self-service machine. It was a man. He was wearing a baseball cap and a nondescript work jacket. He moved with a calm, efficient slowness. He placed the package on the scale. He typed on the screen. He scanned a credit card. Pause it, I said. Mara froze the frame. I leaned in. The face was partially obscured by the bill of the cap, but I knew the jawline. I knew the way he stood, shifting his weight to his left leg. I knew the hands, thick, capable hands that I had seen fixing a leaky faucet and carrying groceries. I felt the air leave the room. "That is not a stranger," I whispered. "Who is it?" Mara asked. "It is Mark Pell," I said. "That is Aunt Diane's boyfriend." Mara sat back, tapping a pen against her desk. "The handyman. The one who told her to stay out of it. He is always around," I said, my voice rising in disbelief. "He mows her lawn. He fixes her car. He sat at her kitchen table and drank coffee with me 2 weeks ago. He asked me how the lawsuit was going. He looked me in the eye and said it was a shame families had to fight. And then he drove to a kiosk and mailed you a destroyed heirloom to terrorize you." Mara said, "Why?" I asked. "Why would Mark Pell care about my sister's inheritance? He barely knows Vanessa. He is not doing it for Vanessa," Mara said. "Or at least, not just for her. We need to find out who Mark Pell actually is. But first, you need to talk to your aunt. If he is using her to get to you, she is in danger too." I drove to Aunt Diane's house with a sick feeling in my stomach. I parked down the street, checking to make sure Mark's truck, a white Ford with no markings, wasn't in the driveway. The driveway was empty. Diane was in the garden, weeding the petunias. She looked fragile, her shoulders hunched under a floral blouse. When she saw me, she smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Lucy," she said, "I didn't know you were coming. I need to talk to you." "Diane," I said, "about Mark." Her face tightened. She stood up, wiping dirt from her hands. "Mark is at work. He is very busy today." "I know," I said. I walked over and took her hands. They were cold. "Diane, someone mailed me Mom's recipe book. It was destroyed. It was soaked in water and ruined." Diane gasped. "Oh, no, Lucy, that is terrible. We have security footage of the person who mailed it," I said gently. Diane went still. She pulled her hands away. It was Mark. "Diane." "No," she said immediately, shaking her head. "Mark wouldn't do that. Mark is a good man. He takes care of me. He is involved." "Diane," I said, "he is helping Vanessa. Or he is helping the people behind Vanessa." Diane turned away, walking toward the porch. "You don't understand. Mark fixes things. He handles everything. Since the mill cut my pension, since I got behind on the taxes, Mark handles it. He says I don't have to worry as long as I let him manage the paperwork." "What paperwork?" I asked, following her. "The house," she whispered. "The bills. He says he has friends who can help with the equity. He says I just need to trust him." I felt a chill. "Diane, have you signed anything? Have you signed anything Mark gave you?" She wouldn't look at me. She picked up a watering can, her hands trembling. "He said it was just temporary, to protect the assets. He said he was setting up a trust." I grabbed her arm, gently but firmly. "Diane, look at me. Mark Pell is not setting up a trust. He is using you. He mailed that package to scare me. If he is doing that to me, what is he doing to you?" She started to cry, silent tears tracking through the dust on her cheeks. "He said if I asked too many questions, the deal would fall through. He said I would lose the house. He said I owe him. How much do you owe him?" She shook her head. "I don't know. He keeps the ledger." I hugged her then, holding her while she sobbed into my shoulder. I realized with a terrifying clarity that this was not just about a few missing heirlooms. Mark Pell was a predator. He had found a lonely, financially insecure woman, and he had embedded himself in her life. And somehow, he had done the same thing with Vanessa. He wasn't a boyfriend. He was a handler. I returned to Mara's office later that afternoon. She had been busy. She had a file open on her desk. I ran a comprehensive background check on Mark Pell. She said, "He is not just a handyman." "What is he?" I asked. "He's a ghost. Mostly." Mara said, "No credit history, no mortgage. He lives in a rental property on the edge of town. But 10 years ago, he was employed as a field agent for a company called Apex Property Solutions." I frowned. "What does that mean?" Apex was a property management firm that specialized in high-risk evictions and distressed asset recovery. Mara said, basically, when a bank foreclosed on a home and the owners refused to leave, or when a landlord wanted to clear out a building to sell it, they called Apex. Mark was the guy who went in and encouraged people to leave. He was a muscle. I said, a fixer, Mara corrected. Apex went under 5 years ago after a class action lawsuit for harassment and illegal eviction practices. The law firm that represented Apex in that defense? I felt the answer before she said it. Calder and Brine. I said, bingo. Mara said, Calder and Brine represented the company Mark worked for. It is a loose connection, but it is there. Mark Pell is part of their ecosystem. He is the guy they call when they need dirty work done off the books. So Vanessa didn't hire Calder and Brine. I said, Mark brought them in. Or they brought Mark in. Mara said, it doesn't matter who started it. The point is, Mark is the bridge. He found Vanessa, probably when she was desperate and being evicted, and he saw an opportunity. He saw a weak link he could exploit to get to, well, to get to whatever they think you have. He is funding her. I said. Mara nodded. And I found something else. I subpoenaed the payment records for the storage unit at Hawthorne Lock and Store. The one in your name. How is it being paid? Monthly money orders, Mara said. Purchased from the customer service desk at the Food Lion on Route 9. That is where Mark shops. I said, I have seen him there with Diane, and the dates of purchase match the dates Mark Pell makes cash withdrawals from his account. Mara said, we have the link. Lucy, we can prove he is paying for the unit that is framed in your name. So we go to the police? I asked. Not yet, Mara said. The police will say it is a civil matter until we can prove criminal intent. We need to know what is in that unit. If we can prove the contents are a setup, we blow the case wide open. I have an emergency hearing with the judge tomorrow morning. She continued, I am going to argue that since the unit is in your name, and since the plaintiff is claiming you are hiding assets, we have a right to inspect it to prove your innocence. I am going to ask for a court-appointed inventory. The court order was granted. 2 days later, I stood in the gravel lot of Hawthorne Lock and Store. The heat was radiating off the metal doors. It was me, Mara, a court-appointed special master named Mr. Henderson, a bored-looking man with a clipboard, and a locksmith. Vanessa and her lawyer had been notified, but they were not there. Richard Sterling had sent a letter objecting to the violation of privacy, but the judge had overruled him. The locksmith drilled the cylinder. It took 30 seconds. The metal groaned, and the lock popped free. Mr. Henderson stepped forward. I will enter first, he said. Do not touch anything until I log it. He rolled up the orange door. The sound was like a thunderclap in the quiet lot. Dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight that cut into the darkness. I stepped closer, peering over Mr. Henderson's shoulder. The unit was 10 by 10. It was full. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just boxes. It was a life. My life. There, sitting on top of a plastic tote, was my winter coat. A gray wool pea coat I thought I had lost at a restaurant last winter. Next to it was the empty box for my laptop, the one I kept in the top of my closet for warranty purposes. How did they get these? I whispered. Mr. Henderson held up a hand. Please, Ms. Walker. He began to move through the unit, calling out items for his voice recorder. Item 1, gray wool coat, brand label J. Crew. Item 2, cardboard box, Apple MacBook Pro packaging, empty. Item 3. He lifted the lid of a plastic bin. Item 3, silver tea service, tarnished, 8 pieces. Stamped sterling. I grabbed Mara's arm. That is the tea set, I hissed. The one Vanessa sold. No, Mara said quietly. She sold a tea set. This must be a duplicate? Or maybe she didn't sell it. Maybe she just pretended to. Mr. Henderson continued. Item 4, porcelain figurine. Ladro. Item 5, vintage brass lamp. I stared at the lamp. It was the same one from the consignment shop, the one I had seen with the yellow tag. They bought it back. I realized Mark Pell went to the shop and bought it back so they could plant it here. The unit was a masterclass in narrative building. It contained a mix of my actual personal property, stolen from my house over the last year, likely by Mark using a key he copied from Diane, and the disputed heirlooms. If the police had opened this unit without me, it would have looked like I was hoarding everything. It would have looked like I stole the family silver and hid it with my winter coat. "It is a frame job," Mara said, her voice low and furious. "It is a perfect frame job. Mr. Henderson reached the back of the unit. There was a metal filing cabinet. He pulled open the top drawer. "Item 22, he said. A manila folder, labeled, Lucy Personal. He pulled it out. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. "That is not my folder." Mr. Henderson opened it. He scanned the contents, his eyebrows lifting. He handed the folder to Mara. "You should see this." Mara took it. She flipped through the pages. Her face went pale. "What is it?" I asked. She handed it to me. Inside were printed screenshots of my bank accounts, the real ones, the ones I accessed from my phone, but there were red circles drawn around certain transactions, with handwritten notes in the margins. Transfer to offshore account? Cash out? And at the back, there was a typed letter. It was dated 3 months ago. "To whom it may concern, I, Lucy Walker, am writing this to clear my conscience. When my father died, I was angry. I felt I deserved more for the care I provided. I took the items listed in the lawsuit because I wanted to punish my sister. I hid them in this unit to keep them safe until the heat died down. I never meant for it to go this far. Signed. The signature block was empty, but clipped to the letter was a practice sheet, a piece of paper covered in attempts to sign my name. Someone was going to make me sign this, I whispered, or Mara said, looking at the practice sheet. They were going to sign it for you, and then they were going to find this folder during the trial. I looked around the dusty metal box. This wasn't just about winning a lawsuit. This was about criminal liability. If this letter had been found by the court, I wouldn't just be broke. I would be in prison for perjury and theft. Mark Pell had built a prison cell for me, and he had filled it with my own things to make sure it fit. I stepped out of the unit, my legs shaking so hard I could barely stand. The sun was still shining. The cars were still driving by on the highway, but the world had tilted on its axis. "They are waiting for us to settle," I said. "That is why they haven't revealed this yet. They want me to give them everything I have voluntarily. But if I don't, if you don't," Mara said, grimly closing the folder, "they pull the trigger on this unit. They tip off the police. An anonymous call. I saw a woman moving suspicious goods. The police come. They cut the lock, and they find the confession." I looked at the locksmith, who was packing up his drill. I looked at Mr. Henderson, who was tagging the silver tea set. "We have to flip the board." I said, "What do you mean?" Mara asked. "Vanessa thinks this is her safety net." I said, "She thinks this unit is the gun pointed at my head, but she doesn't know we are here. She doesn't know we have the inventory." "No," Mara said. "We served notice to her lawyer. Sterling knows. Sterling knows we are here today." I said, "But does he know what we found? Does he know about the letter?" "He will when Mr. Henderson files his report." Mara said, "Then we have to move fast." I said, I looked at the folder in my hand. Mark Pell wrote this, or he hired someone to write it. It sounds like me. It uses my phrases. "Clear my conscience." The heat died down. I looked closer at the practice sheet clipped to the letter. In the corner, there was a faint, embossed stamp on the paper. It was barely visible, just a texture. I held it up to the sunlight. "Tax Pro Services, 114 Main St." I lowered the paper. "I know where this paper came from." I said, "Where?" Mara asked. "There's a tax prep place on Main Street." I said, "A seasonal pop-up." Vanessa worked there last tax season. She answered the phones. She had access to the stationery. Mara said, "And the printers." I said, "And the templates." I looked back at the ominous metal door of Unit 404. "Lock it up." I told Mr. Henderson, "Lock it all up." I turned to Mara. "Vanessa thinks she is trapping me." I said, but she just left her fingerprints on the trap. I walked back to my car. The fear was still there. But it was different now. It was cold and hard. I wasn't going to wait for the final hearing. I wasn't going to wait for Mark Pell to make his next move. I was going to the tax office, and then I was going to have a conversation with the junior partner at Calder and Brine. Because if Mark Pell was the fixer, then someone at that law firm was the architect, and I was going to find out who signed the blueprints. That night, the house felt different. It was no longer a shelter. It was a staging ground. I sat at my kitchen table with the copy of the inventory list. Item 1, gray wool coat. I remembered wearing that coat the day I signed my divorce papers. I remembered feeling cold, pulling the collar up. Item 3, silver tea set. I remembered polishing that set with Mom. The smell of the pink paste, the way she hummed while she worked. They had taken these things and twisted them into evidence of a crime. They had weaponized my memories. I looked at my phone. I had a text from Tessa. "You okay?" I typed back, "No, but I am done being afraid." I deleted the text. I didn't want a record. I didn't want Mark Pell to know his prey had stopped running. I went to the window and looked out at the street. A car slowed down, then sped up. A white sedan. I watched it go. "You think you have me cornered," I thought, staring into the dark. "But you just showed me exactly where you are standing." I turned off the light. Tomorrow, I would go on the offensive. Tomorrow, I would take the lawsuit that was meant to bury me and turn it into a shovel. Mara Eddings did not look like a woman who was losing. She sat behind her desk, surrounded by the debris of discovery, stacks of bank records, the inventory from the storage unit, and the damning photographs of the destroyed recipe book. She was writing on a yellow legal pad, her pen carving deep grooves into the paper. "We are done playing defense," Mara said without looking up. She ripped the page off the pad and placed it on top of the file. "I am filing a counterclaim this afternoon," she continued. "Finally meeting my eyes, abuse of process, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and I am requesting an emergency hearing to enjoin Vanessa from making any further public statements regarding your employment or your financial status." I sat in the chair opposite her, feeling a strange mixture of exhaustion and adrenaline. The fear that had paralyzed me for weeks was hardening into something colder. I had seen the inside of that storage unit. I had seen the fake confession letter Mark Pell had drafted for me. They weren't just trying to take my money. They were trying to erase my reality. "Will it stop them?" I asked. "No," Mara said, "but it forces them to fight on two fronts. Right now, they think they are the hunters. They think you are cowering in the dark, waiting for the next blow. We need to show them that we have teeth." She slid a folder across the desk. "But before we file, we need to nail down the mechanics of the forgery." Mara said, "I sent the digital files, the screenshots found in the storage unit, and the metadata from the receipt, to a specialist in Raleigh, a man named David Chen. What did he find?" I asked. "Go see him," Mara said. "He explains it better than I can. And Lucy? He found a fingerprint in the code." David Chen's office was the opposite of Dr. Caro's sterile lab. It was a dark, cool room in a basement suite, illuminated by the blue glow of 3 massive monitors. David was a young man with sleeve tattoos and a nervous energy. He pulled up the file immediately. "Okay, so here's the deal," David said, pointing to the screen. He spoke fast. "You gave me the digital file of the confession letter and the bank screenshots that were found on the flash drive in the storage unit." I nodded. "Metadata is like a digital footprint," David said. "Most people do not know how to scrub it. They think if they delete a file, it is gone. They think if they print a document, the origin is lost. It is not." He clicked a key, and a string of code appeared on the screen. The file for the confession letter was created on a computer running Windows 10. He said, "The user account registered to the software license is TaxPro Station 4. I frowned. "TaxPro? It looks like a commercial license," David said. "Small business software." And looking at the formatting of the bank screenshots. "See these margins? See the header line here?" He zoomed in on the top of the document. "That is a standard template for a tax preparation summary." David said, Whoever made these didn't start from scratch. They took a template used for client audits and pasted your bank info into it. They were lazy, or they were just using the tools they had in front of them. I stared at the screen. Tax Pro Station 4. I remembered the faint embossed texture I had seen on the practice signature sheet in the storage unit. Tax Pro Services. I know where this is, I said. Tax Pro Services was a storefront in a strip mall on the east side of Granton Ridge, sandwiched between a nail salon and a vape shop. It was the kind of place that popped up in January and disappeared by May, catering to people who needed their refunds fast and didn't ask too many questions about the fees. It was closed for the season, the windows covered in brown paper, but the sign was still up. I parked my car and walked up to the glass door. I cupped my hands around my eyes and peered through a gap in the paper. The office was stripped bare, but there were still desks lined up against the wall. 4 of them. I looked at the decal on the door. Tax Pro Services, fast refunds, audit support. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number listed on the sign. It went to a generic voicemail. I called Mara. It is a seasonal tax place. I said, "It is closed now." "I know." Mara said, "I had my investigator run the employment records for the franchise. Guess who was on the payroll from January to April?" "Vanessa." I said, "Vanessa Walker." Mara confirmed. She was a seasonal data entry clerk. She had access to the computers. She had access to the printers. And most importantly, she had access to the client templates. She drafted the confession letter at work, I said, feeling a surge of disgust. She sat there, probably between customers, and typed up a letter claiming I was a thief. She used their paper. She used their software. It explains the polish, Mara said. The documents in the evidence packet looked official because they were created on professional software. She didn't just type them up on a laptop at home. She built a dossier using her employer's resources. It was so petty, and yet so effective. Vanessa had taken a temporary job and turned it into a weapon factory. "We have her." I said, "We can prove she created the documents. We can prove they were created at her workplace." Mara corrected, "It is strong circumstantial evidence, but we need to tie it all together. We need to know who paid for the lawyers, because a seasonal data entry clerk does not have $50,000 for a retainer." The answer to the money question came 2 days later. From the most unexpected source. I was at work, sitting in my temporary office in the archives, a dusty, windowless room where I had been exiled, when my cell phone rang. The number was local, but I didn't recognize it. "This is Lucy," I answered. "Ms. Walker?" The voice was male, young and hesitant. "Yes. Who is this?" "This is Evan Brine." I froze. Evan Brine was the junior partner at Calder and Brine. He was the attorney whose name was on the motions destroying my life. He was the enemy. "I should not be talking to you," I said, my hand hovering over the end call button. "You need to call my attorney. Please, don't hang up," he said quickly. "I am not calling to discuss the litigation strategy. I am calling off the record. There is no off the record." I said, "I am hanging up. Ms. Walker, please. I have a professional obligation to the court, and I am seeing things in this file that do not add up." I paused. His voice sounded genuinely rattled. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I cannot discuss this over the phone," Evan said, "and I cannot meet you alone. It would be unethical. But if you and Ms. Eddings could meet me for a brief conference, purely for the purpose of clarifying the representation structure, I think it would be illuminating." "You want to help me?" I asked, skeptical. "I want to make sure I still have a license to practice law next year," Evan said, his voice dropping. "Meet me at the coffee shop near the courthouse. In an hour. Bring your lawyer." I called Mara immediately. "He is spooked," Mara said after I relayed the conversation. "He realizes he is sitting on a grenade." "Is it a trap?" I asked. "Probably not," Mara said. "If he wanted to trap us, he would do it in a deposition. This is damage control. He knows we found the storage unit. He knows we have the Juniper House records. He is trying to figure out if his client has lied to him before he walks into a perjury charge." We met Evan Brine at a corner table in the back of the coffee shop. He looked younger than I expected, maybe 28, with a sharp suit that looked too expensive for the setting. He was sweating. He didn't order coffee. He sat with his hands clasped on the table. "Thank you for coming," he said. "This is highly irregular." "Mr. Brine," Mara said, her voice cool. "If you are here to intimidate my client, I am not." Evan said. He looked around the room, checking for eavesdroppers. "Look, I cannot violate attorney-client privilege regarding the facts of the case. I cannot tell you what Vanessa has said to me." "Then why are we here?" I asked. "Because I can clarify the billing entity." Evan said. Mara leaned in. "The billing entity? Standard procedure requires us to disclose who is paying the fees if it is not the client, to ensure there is no conflict of interest." Evan said, "Usually, this is a formality, a parent paying for a child, a husband paying for a wife." He took a breath. When this case was brought to the firm, it was presented as a high-value estate recovery. Evan said, "We were told there were significant assets hidden. The retainer was paid via wire transfer." "From whom?" Mara asked. "A corporate entity." Evan said, "Pell Advisory Services." The name hit me like a physical blow. The air in the coffee shop seemed to vanish. "Pell," I whispered. Evan looked at me. "You know the name?" "I know the man." I said, "Mark Pell." Evan nodded slowly. "The contact for the entity is a Mark Pell. He represented himself as a financial advisor assisting the family with estate liquidation. He has been directing the litigation strategy. He is the one pushing for the aggressive discovery. He is the one who insisted on the storage unit seizure." I felt sick. Mark Pell wasn't just Diane's boyfriend. He wasn't just a handyman. He was the architect. He had hired the lawyers. He had paid the fees. He was the one pulling the strings that made Vanessa dance. "Is Vanessa even in charge?" I asked. Evan hesitated. "Legally, she is the client. But practically, she defers to Mr. Pell on everything. She calls him before she answers a question. She looks at him before she signs a document." He leaned back. "Look, I shouldn't be saying this, but we received your counterclaim draft. We received the notice about the storage unit inventory. If my firm is being used to facilitate a fraud, if the evidence we are submitting is fabricated, you need to know." Mara finished for him. "I need to know," Evan said, "because if this blows up, I am not going down for it." He stood up. "I have to go. But check the incorporation papers for Pell Advisory Services. I think you will find they are sparse." He walked out, leaving us with the revelation that reshaped the entire war. Back at Mara's office, we dug into Pell Advisory Services. It took Mara 10 minutes to pull the corporate filings. "It is a shell," Mara said, staring at the screen. "Incorporated 6 months ago in Delaware. No employees, no physical office, just a registered agent address." "Who owns it?" I asked. "The managing member is Mark Pell." Mara said, "But look at the funding." She pointed to a line in the credit report she had pulled. "It has a single bank account," Mara said, "and that account shows regular cash deposits, large ones, $9,000 here, $8,000 there, just under the $10,000 reporting limit." "Where is he getting the money?" I asked. "Mark fixes toilets. He cuts grass. He doesn't have thousands of dollars in cash to funnel into a shell company." Mara looked at me, her expression soft and sad. "Lucy, think about what Diane told you." I froze. "He handles the paperwork," Diane had said. "He says I just need to trust him." "No," I whispered. "No, he couldn't. Diane owns her house outright." Mara said, "It is the only asset she has. It is worth maybe $200,000 in this market." I stood up, pacing the small office. "You think he mortgaged her house?" "I think he took out a home equity line of credit in her name," Mara said, "or he convinced her to sign over power of attorney. He is draining her equity, laundering the cash through Pell Advisory Services, and using it to pay for the lawsuit against you." My stomach turned over. It was monstrous. He was cannibalizing one sister to destroy the niece of the other. He was using our family's own resources, Diane's security, Vanessa's grief, to feed himself. But why? I asked. What does he get out of it? If he wins, Mara said, he gets the judgment. If the court orders you to pay $50,000 or surrenders your assets, that money goes to Vanessa, and Vanessa owes him. He cleans her out. He cleans you out. And he leaves Diane with a foreclosure notice. He is a parasite. I said, he is a professional. Mara said, this is what Apex Property Solutions used to do. They would identify distressed families, create conflict, and then strip the assets while everyone was fighting. He is running the same play, just on a smaller scale. I sat down, burying my face in my hands. I thought about Aunt Diane in her garden, planting petunias, thinking Mark was her second chance at love, thinking he was her protector. He was eating her alive. I cannot let him do this to her. I said, I don't care about the lawsuit anymore. I have to save Diane. We save her by winning. Mara said, we expose him in court. We put Pell Advisory Services on the record. We show the judge that the plaintiff is a puppet for a predator. The emotional weight of the truth was heavier than the fear had been. I drove home that evening feeling a profound sense of grief, not for myself, but for the shattered remnants of my family. Vanessa was a villain. Yes, she had lied. She had forged. She had betrayed me. But she was also a victim. Mark Pell had found the cracks in her soul. Her jealousy, her financial desperation, and he had pried them open until she broke. And Diane, sweet, anxious Diane, she was sleeping next to the man who was bankrupting her. I wanted to drive to Diane's house and scream the truth at her. I wanted to shake her until she listened, but Mara had warned me. If you confront him now, he disappears. He drains the accounts and vanishes. We need to trap him in the courtroom. I had to wait. I had to let the play finish. 2 days later, the final pretrial exchange occurred. This was the moment where both sides showed their final hand before the hearing. Mara called me to review Vanessa's submission. They are doubling down. Mara said. She handed me the document, plaintiff's final schedule of damages and demands. It was a terrifying list. 1. Immediate surrender of all assets listed in Exhibit A. 2. Punitive damages in the amount of $75,000 for emotional distress. 3. Legal fees in the amount of $42,000. 4. A court order granting plaintiff full title to defendant's current residence, claiming it was purchased with misappropriated estate funds. They want my house, I said, staring at the paper. They want a settlement, Mara said. They are making the number so high that you panic and offer them $20,000 just to go away. But I don't have $20,000, I said. They know that. Mara said, they want you to liquidate. They want you to sell the car, sell the stocks, take out a loan. Mark Pell wants cash. I looked at the hearing date stamped on the top of the page. June 12th, 9:00 a.m., that is next week, I said. Mara nodded. She looked fierce. Let them come, she said. They think they are walking into a payday. They don't know they are walking into an ambush. We spent the next 3 days preparing the trial binder. It was a masterpiece of forensic accounting and timeline reconstruction. Tab 1. The true inventory of my possessions, backed by receipts I had dug out of the attic. Tab 2. The analysis of the forged signature by Dr. Caro. Tab 3. The Juniper House consignment records, showing Vanessa selling the stolen items. Tab 4. The security footage of Mark Pell mailing the destroyed book. Tab 5. The corporate filings for Pell Advisory Services. Tab 6. The metadata from the tax prep store. It was a story of greed, manipulation, and lies. But there was one wild card left, the storage unit. Vanessa and Mark still thought the storage unit was their ace. They thought that when the bailiff opened the official inventory of the unit, it would reveal the planted heirlooms and the confession letter. They didn't know we had already been there. They didn't know Mr. Henderson, the special master, had already logged the fraud. They are going to ask the judge to open the unit records in open court. Mara said, they want the dramatic reveal. We will let them have it. I said. Mara smiled. A sharp, dangerous smile. Exactly. We let them call for the list. We let them build the trap. And then we let them step into it. The night before the hearing. I couldn't be in my house. It felt too quiet. I drove to the edge of town, to a scenic overlook that looked down on the valley. Granton Ridge twinkled below me. Somewhere down there, Vanessa was preparing her testimony. She was probably rehearsing her tears. She was probably telling herself that she deserved this, that I had always had it easy, that she was just taking what was hers. And somewhere down there, Mark Pell was checking his bank account, waiting for the wire transfer that would never come. I thought about the voicemail I had received months ago, the one that started this whole nightmare. You can't hide it forever. Lucy, I wasn't hiding anymore. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Aunt Diane. Thinking of you. Honey, Mark says everything will be over soon. Love you. I stared at the screen, tears blurring my vision. Yes, Aunt Diane, I thought, it will be over soon. But not the way Mark thinks. I wiped my eyes and looked out at the dark horizon. I was done with sadness. I was done with fear. I was ready for the morning. I was ready to look my sister in the eye and show her exactly what happens when you try to burn down the wrong house. I put the car in gear and drove back toward the lights. The courtroom was waiting. The Granton County Civil Courthouse was a building designed to make you feel small. It was a block of gray limestone that absorbed the morning heat and radiated it back as a suffocating weight. I walked up the wide steps at 8:30 in the morning, my heels clicking on the stone with a rhythm that felt too loud in the heavy air. I was 32 years old, but as I walked past the columns, I felt ancient. My skin felt tight, stretched thin over bones that were tired of holding me upright. I was wearing my best navy suit, the one I usually saved for quarterly reviews with the regional directors. Today, I was wearing it to fight for my life. The gallery was already half full. Granton Ridge was a small town, and a lawsuit between sisters over a family estate was better entertainment than anything on cable. I saw faces I recognized. Mrs. Gable from the bakery, the man who changed my oil at the garage, my coworkers from the logistics center, sitting in a cluster near the back, looking uncomfortable. They were there to see if the rumors were true. They were there to see if Lucy Walker, the quiet manager who approved their timesheets, was actually a thief who preyed on the elderly. I sat at the defendant's table next to Mara. She looked calm, her papers arranged in neat stacks. She touched my arm. "Breathe, Lucy," she said softly. "Just breathe." Then the doors opened, and Vanessa walked in. She looked perfect. She was wearing a soft, cream-colored dress that made her look fragile, like a porcelain doll that had been dropped and glued back together. Her hair was loose, framing a face that was devoid of makeup, highlighting the redness around her eyes. She carried a tissue in one hand. She walked to the plaintiff's table without looking at me. She sat down next to Richard Sterling, who looked like a panther in a three-piece suit. He patted her hand. It was a performance. Every inch of it was staged for the judge. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Anthony Klein entered. He was a stern man with a reputation for hating wasted time. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked at the two tables. "We are here for the matter of Walker versus Walker," Judge Klein said. "We have a motion for asset recovery and a counterclaim for abuse of process. Mr. Sterling, you may proceed." Sterling stood up. He buttoned his jacket with a practiced flick of his wrist. "Your Honor," he began, his voice filling the room. "This case is simple. It is about a daughter who was erased. It is about a woman who was denied her birthright by a sister who used her proximity to a dying father to enrich herself. We are asking for the return of what was stolen." He called Vanessa to the stand. Vanessa walked up, her head bowed. She took the oath, her voice trembling on the words, "So help me God." Sterling walked her through the story we all knew by now. The distance, the grief, the shock of finding the house empty. "Vanessa," Sterling asked gently, "can you tell the court what items are missing?" Vanessa sniffed. Her hand shook as she lifted the tissue to her nose. "Everything," she whispered. "The silver tea set, my mother's pearl brooch, the gold watch Dad promised me, and the recipe book. That was all I wanted. Just the book with Mom's handwriting. But Lucy said it was gone. She said there was nothing left. She looked at me then. Her eyes were wet, filled with a sorrow that looked so real I almost believed it myself. She kept it all, Vanessa said, her voice gaining strength. She hid it. She used the family influence to get a mortgage, to buy a new car. While I was struggling to pay rent, she erased me to build herself up. A murmur went through the gallery. I felt the eyes of the town on my back. I stared straight ahead, digging my fingernails into my palms until I felt the sharp bite of pain. Hold it together, I told myself. Do not let them see you bleed. Mr. Sterling turned to the judge. Your Honor, we request that the court order the defendant to surrender the full inventory of possessions acquired since the date of Robert Walker's death. We ask for justice. Thank you. Mr. Sterling, Judge Klein said. Ms. Eddings? Mara stood up. She did not button her jacket. She walked to the podium with a file in her hand. Good morning, Ms. Walker, Mara said. Vanessa stiffened. Good morning. You claim my client, Lucy Walker, stole these items and hid them, correct? Yes, Vanessa said. And you claim that you have suffered financial damages because of this theft? I have, Vanessa said. I have spent my savings trying to recover what is mine. Mara nodded. She opened the file. Ms. Walker, how are you paying for your legal representation today? Sterling shot up. Objection. Irrelevant. It is highly relevant. Your Honor, Mara said coolly. The plaintiff claims financial ruin, yet she has retained one of the most expensive firms in the state. We are establishing credibility. Overruled, Judge Klein said. Answer the question. Vanessa hesitated. She looked at Sterling. She looked at the back of the room. I have savings, she said. Mara pulled a paper from the file. Is it not true, Ms. Walker, that your legal fees are being paid by a third-party entity known as Pell Advisory Services? Vanessa blanched. I don't know the details. Let me refresh your memory, Mara said. She held up a bank record. Here is a wire transfer for $10,000 to Calder and Brine, originating from Pell Advisory Services. Who runs Pell Advisory Services? Ms. Walker? Vanessa was silent. Her eyes darted around the room. Is it Mark Pell? Mara asked. Sterling stood up again. Objection! Mark Pell is a friend, Vanessa shouted, her voice cracking. He is helping me manage the estate. Mara did not let up. And does Mr. Pell also manage your storage needs? I don't have a storage unit, Vanessa said quickly. That is why I had to leave the heirlooms with Lucy. I didn't have space. Mara turned to the judge. Your Honor, we would like to introduce Exhibit D. These are records from Hawthorne Lock and Store. They show a unit, number 404, rented in the name of Lucy Walker. Vanessa smiled, a small, triumphant twitch of her lips. See, she said. She rented it. She hid the stuff there. Mara paused. She let the silence hang in the air for 5 seconds. Actually, Mara said, her voice dropping to a dangerous register, the rental agreement was signed digitally, but the monthly payments were made via money orders purchased at the Food Lion on Route 9. Mara walked to the projector. She placed a transparency on the glass. On the left, we have security footage of Mark Pell purchasing money orders at the Food Lion on May 3rd, May 10th, and June 1st. On the right, we have the deposit records for the storage unit, posting the exact same amounts on the exact same days. The gallery was silent now. The murmuring had stopped. Ms. Walker, Mara said, did you and Mark Pell rent this unit in my client's name to frame her? No, Vanessa shrieked. She gripped the railing of the witness stand. I didn't rent anything. Lucy is the one with the keys. Mara closed the file. We will see about that, she said. Mara returned to the table. Judge Klein looked at Vanessa, then at Sterling. His expression had hardened. We have heard enough testimony, the judge said. The court ordered a neutral inventory of the storage unit in question. Bailiff, please bring the master inventory list. This was the moment, the title of the nightmare I had been living. My sister demanded all my possessions. Now, the list would speak. Sterling stood up, holding a thick binder. Your Honor, This is the plaintiff's list of missing items, he said. Judge Klein waved a hand. I have your list. Mr. Sterling, I want the official list. The one compiled by the special master and the neutral observer from the sheriff's office. The bailiff, a burly man named Officer Davis, stepped forward with a sealed envelope. He broke the seal. The sound of tearing paper echoed in the quiet room. Read the findings into the record. Officer Davis, Judge Klein ordered. Officer Davis adjusted his glasses. He held the paper up to the light. Inventory of Unit 404. Hawthorne Lock and Store. Conducted June 9th. He read, Item 1. 1 gray wool coat. Women's size medium. Brand J. Crew. Item 2. 1 cardboard box. Apple MacBook Pro packaging. Empty. I heard a gasp from the back. Those were my things. My missing things. Item 3. 1 silver tea service. 8 pieces. Stamped sterling. Matches description of plaintiff's claimed missing property. Item 4. 1 vintage brass floor lamp. Matches description of plaintiff's claimed missing property. Officer Davis paused. He looked closely at the next line. Item 5. 1 receipt from Juniper House Consignment. Dated February 14th. For the sale of 1 pearl brooch. Seller listed as Eliza Stone. Vanessa let out a sound like a wounded animal. Sterling froze. Item 6. Officer Davis continued, his voice monotone. 1 receipt from Juniper House Consignment. Dated March 2nd. For the sale of 1 gold Omega watch. Seller listed as Eliza Stone. The gallery erupted. People were whispering, pointing. She sold them. Someone hissed. She sold them and blamed her sister. Silence. Judge Klein banged his gavel. Continue. Officer Davis turned the page. Item 7. 1 administrative asset. A locked document pouch. Black vinyl. Recovered from the rear filing cabinet. Open it, Judge Klein said. Officer Davis unzipped the pouch on the judge's bench. He pulled out a stack of papers. Judge Klein took the papers. He read the first one. His eyebrows shot up. He read the second one. His face turned a deep, angry red. He looked over his glasses at Vanessa. Ms. Walker, the judge said, his voice dangerously quiet. Do you recognize this document? He held up a piece of paper. It was a checklist, a typed list with bullet points. I could read the header from where I sat. Plan A. The judge read aloud. Step 1. Establish storage unit under target's name. Step 2. Deposit low-value personal items stolen from target's home to establish ownership. Step 3. Deposit unsold estate items. Step 4. Pressure Lucy into settlement before discovery phase. Judge Klein dropped the paper onto the bench. And this, he said, holding up another sheet, a formation document for Pell Advisory Services, listing Mark Pell as the director and Vanessa Walker as the secretary. Vanessa stood up. She was shaking so hard the chair rattled against the floor. I didn't write that, she screamed. Mark wrote that. Mark told me it was a business plan. He told me we were just securing my assets. So you admit you were working with Mr. Pell? Judge Klein asked. He made me, Vanessa cried. She looked at Sterling, grabbing his arm. Tell them Mark handled everything. I just wanted my money. He said Lucy stole it. He said we had to get it back. Sterling pulled his arm away. He looked at the judge. Your Honor, I must request a recess. I was not made aware of these documents. Request denied. Judge Klein snapped. Sit down. Mr. Sterling? Vanessa was sobbing now. Ugly, gasping sobs. It wasn't the polite crying of the victim anymore. It was the terrified unraveling of a conspirator. I was manipulated, Vanessa wailed. He told me Lucy had millions. He told me she was hiding it offshore. He said if we squeezed her, she would pay. Judge Klein leaned forward. Ms. Walker, you signed a sworn affidavit stating you had no knowledge of these items. You submitted forged receipts. You used this court as a weapon to harass your sister and extort money. I do not care what Mr. Pell told you. You signed the papers. He turned to the bailiff. The court finds against the plaintiff on all counts. Judge Klein said, The demand for asset surrender is dismissed with prejudice. The court grants the defendant's counterclaim for abuse of process. He looked at me. Ms. Walker, I am sanctioning the plaintiff in the amount of legal fees incurred by your defense. I am also referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation into fraud and perjury. He banged the gavel. Court is adjourned. The room exploded into noise. I sat still. I couldn't move. I felt Mara's hand on my shoulder, squeezing hard. We won, she said. Lucy, we won. I looked at Vanessa. She had collapsed into her chair, her face buried in her hands. Sterling was packing his briefcase with furious speed, not saying a word to her. She was alone. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt a hollow ache in my chest. I stood up and walked toward the exit. The townspeople parted for me, their faces a mixture of awe and shame. They had believed the lie, and now they were scrambling to align themselves with the truth. I walked out the heavy double doors into the blinding noon sun. The heat hit me first. Then, the sight of the figure on the steps. Aunt Diane was sitting on the bottom step of the courthouse. She was wearing her Sunday dress, but she looked shrunken inside it. She was clutching her phone with both hands, staring at the screen. Diane? I said. Walking down the steps, she didn't look up. Her voice was a whisper, carried away by the wind. He is gone, she said. Who? I asked, though I knew. Mark, she said. I tried to call him. I tried to tell him what happened in there. The number is disconnected. I sat down next to her on the dirty stone. Diane, I said gently. He was never going to answer. She turned to me. Her eyes were wide and dry, the shock too deep for tears. I went to the bank this morning, she said, to get money for parking. The account is empty. Lucy. My stomach dropped. Which account? My retirement, she said, and the home equity line. He told me to sign the access over to him last week. He said he needed to move the funds to a secure hold while the lawsuit finished. He said it was to protect me from the lawyers. How much? Diane? I asked, dreading the answer. $150,000, she whispered. It is all gone. My house. The bank says the payment is overdue. I put my arm around her. She was shaking, a fine tremor that vibrated through her bones. He didn't just target me, I realized. He used Vanessa to distract me. He used the lawsuit to keep everyone looking at the shiny, dramatic fight in the courtroom. And while we were all watching Vanessa scream about heirlooms, Mark Pell was quietly draining the real money from the one person who trusted him completely. He stripped the house, I said. He stripped us all. Vanessa came out of the courthouse doors then. She looked like a ghost. She saw us sitting on the steps, me, the sister she tried to destroy, and Diane, the aunt she had helped rob. She stopped. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She looked at Diane's stricken face, and I saw the realization hit her. She hadn't just lost a lawsuit. She had been the accomplice to the destruction of her own family. She turned and walked away, stumbling toward the parking lot, alone. I looked down at the paper in my hand. It was the court-stamped order, judgment for defendant. I had won. I had kept my house. I had kept my car. I had proven I wasn't a thief. But as I sat there, holding the sobbing woman who had lost her future because of a con man I had been too slow to catch, the victory felt like ash in my mouth. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It wasn't a text. It was a voicemail notification. Unknown number. I pressed play. Holding the phone to my ear against the noise of the traffic, the voice was smooth, calm, and terrifyingly familiar. It was the voice of the man who had sat at Diane's kitchen table and drunk her coffee. "You think you won," Mark Pell's voice said. There was a smile in the audio. "You kept your little life. Lucy, good for you. But tell Diane I said thank you. The house had good bones." The line clicked dead. I looked up at the courthouse doors, looming over us like a tombstone. The legal case was over. The judge had banged his gavel, but Mark Pell was out there, driving away with $150,000 and the wreckage of my family in his rearview mirror. I gripped Diane's hand tighter. "Come on," I said. standing up and pulling her with me. "We have work to do." "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice broken. "To the police," I said, and then, "We are going to find him." I looked at the empty street where Vanessa had disappeared. The story wasn't about heirlooms anymore. It wasn't about the past. It was about the hunt, and I was done being the prey. Thank you for listening to My Sister Demanded All My Possessions in Court, until the bailiff read out the list. I hope you enjoyed this journey of betrayal, justice, and the dark secrets that families can hide. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please drop a comment below and tell me which part of the story shocked you the most. If you want to hear more stories about justice served cold, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. Your support helps me bring these dramas to life. Share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know. Do you think Lucy will ever find Mark Pell? Until next time.